Hello, YouTube. An astronomer's article about the mystery of daytime stars, banned 100 years ago, was to be published in the famine year of 1919 in the Soviet Russia. A prominent Russian astronomer, Daniil Sviatsky, wrote more than just a strange article, but he couldn't publish it. The text had already been typed in the printing house, but the censorship from the communist authorities decisively crossed out the proofs with a sweeping cross. So more than a century ago, this is what happened. And then now the Russian newspaper Komsomolskaya Pravda has discovered a miraculously preserved copy of this amazing work in the archives of the Russian Academy of Sciences. The article is about those rare cases when in broad daylight, without any eclipse, the sky darkens and the stars appear on it. Sviatsky hoped that the Russian Revolution had brought freedom to Russia and that scientists could discuss topics previously considered unscientific, but this seemed to be too bold even for that turbulent time. And after now more than 100 years, Russian journalists are bringing back one of nature's most burning mysteries from oblivion. After all, there is simply no natural explanation for the daytime stars. Let us travel to ancient Rome, to December of the year 192 AD or Common Era. The Roman amphitheater is full. The audience stares at the powerful figure of the athlete who had just entered the arena. A skin is draped over the shoulders of a half-naked man. He brandishes his spear. They release wild animals. The gladiator easily kills a ferocious boar, cuts off the innocent animal's head, and throws it, covered in blood, directly onto the stands of the first row where the senators are sitting. Blood splashes into the faces of the nobility like a fountain, spreading over the snow-white togas. Hatred sparkles in the eyes of the jaded, tired of feasting and drinking. This gladiator has the right to do what he wants. After all, he is none other than the Emperor Commodus himself. Although he is the emperor outside of the circus, and here in the arena he is Hercules, Commodus believed that he embodied the spirit of an ancient hero. Haven't you seen the movie Gladiator? It's about Commodus. The emperor is 31 years old in the year 192 Common Era. He is adored by the people and hated by the senators. He is the son of the great emperor Marcus Aurelius, the best ruler of Rome. So they said then, and so they said now. He doesn't look like his father. He was a strong-minded but physically weak and sickly philosopher who talked to avoid violence, his father. This in the arena is a brusque, reckless man who believes in strength and only strength. Suddenly something happens. The sun is still shining brightly in a clear sky, but it's like some kind of mist is descending from above. People jump up from their seats and look up. In the dark sky next to the dazzling sun, there's a strange, curved crescent moon, two bright stars, and the tail of a colossal comet. Imagine it in your mind. The senators will kill Commodus on December the 31st. Strangely, the details of the crime will be repeated over the centuries in the murder of Russia's Rasputin. No one dared to move on Commodus with a weapon, not even on a sleeping man, not even in a crowd. Poisoned he was, but the poison had a bad effect. Then they piled on top of the staggering Commodus and strangled him. The event in the amphitheater has been chronicled. After all, the people believed in it. There was a prediction of the emperor's imminent demise. A lot happened that December. The temple servants came in the morning and saw that footprints were being dragged away from behind the locked doors. It was as if the gods had left the temples. When they opened the doors, the statues were turned in different directions, and the sculpture of Hercules was covered in perspiration. It seems that people really did see real stars in the heat of that day, writes Daniil Sviatsky. It is not difficult to restore the position of the luminaries on any date. One of the stars is Venus, the other is Jupiter. The comet was not invented either. It was observed by Chinese astronomers from October to December of the year 192. They must have seen it in Rome. It is unclear what happened to the moon. Sviatsky analyzes an old drawing in which an unknown artist depicted how everything was. The moon is not just distorted, there are two crescents, and they are turned away from each other. Sviatsky is not only an astronomer, he is also a meteorologist. He suggests that the moon was distorted by a halo, an optical phenomenon that occurs when the air is clogged with something, ice crystals or dust. That's just the problem. The murky air could not show people the stars during the day. Maybe there was a solar eclipse. Although in the drawing the sun is shining in full splendor, Sviatsky rummaged through the archives, and in fact, in the catalog of eclipses compiled back in the 17th century, he found it. That's all explained. The moon covered the sun, and planets and a comet appeared in the darkened sky. But he decided to double-check. An astronomer can set the date of any eclipse thousands of years ago. What is it? But there was no eclipse. He read the old catalog carefully. It turned out that its author, having read in the chronicles about the incident in the amphitheater, took and put a solar eclipse on these dates without correlating with the actual location of the luminaries. And what could it be besides an eclipse? The author reasoned. Really, what? Analyzing chronicles and written records, Daniil Sviatsky unexpectedly discovers that ancient writers mention two more similar cases. One shortly before, the other shortly after the incident in the amphitheater. Thus, the historian Herodian reports the following: the stars were constantly visible during the day. The other luminaries stretched out in length, so that they seemed to hang in the middle of the air. Historians date this evidence to 190, the year 190 of the Common Era, that is 2 years before the events described above. Daniil Sviatsky also unearthed a quote from a very reliable, serious historian, Cassius Dio. These are the events of the year 193, when after the assassination of Commodus, chaos predictably broke out, and a certain Julian occupied the throne for a short time. This, Julius' inglorious end, was foreshadowed by the sudden appearance of 3 stars around the sun at the very moment when Julian was offering sacrifices in front of the Senate building on the occasion of taking office. They were so clearly visible that the warriors kept looking up at the sky and pointing to the sign to each other. A rumor began to spread to their ranks that Julian was going to suffer a terrible fate, wrote Cassius Dio. So for 2 or 3 years, people in Italy have seen stars at least 3 times in broad daylight without any eclipse. Sviatsky concludes, and this is strange, but was it only then or something like that happened? Let's look at the case in the Russian monastery. Very rarely things like that happen, but there was one more. Thus Sviatsky, in his unpublished work, refers to the incident of April 20 to 22nd in the year of 1547, unfortunately without specifying the source. Sviatsky reports that the stars were visible in the midst of the sunshine for 3 days. The sun itself seemed to be a ball of fire. That is, it hasn't faded. But has it somehow changed? Even more interestingly, this was seen in the Russian Empire. Sviatsky dwells on this episode in particular detail. Here is what it said in the Chernigov Chronicle dated June 6, 1703. There was a moon in the sky, and 2 stars were close to it, and then, before sunset, it was not visible until the 7th hour, until the evening. So Sviatsky undertook a whole investigation involving other fellow astronomers. The difficulty was also that at the beginning of the 18th century in Russia, some people switched to the new calendar, Peter the Great's calendars, and some did not. And the confusion with the dates was terrible. As a result, it turned out that one of the stars was exactly Venus, which for some reason appeared in the afternoon near the moon. But the second one could not be identified, which makes the message especially mysterious. Sviatsky suggests that it was Mars, but there is no certainty. Here are all the known cases. There are very few of them. Let's try to figure it out. Why don't we see stars during the day? The atmosphere gets in the way. Sunlight is scattered by air molecules in such a way that the radiance of the sky is many times stronger than even the brightest stars. Only the moon is visible during the day, and it's like a pale cloud. The telescope seems to push the blue sky apart, and the stars, on the contrary, it highlights. The contrast increases. You can try to consider the most noticeable. The easiest way is Venus, but even this planet is not an easy object. People tried many times, but it only worked for a few times. You're looking exactly where you need to be looking. Nothing. Suddenly, abruptly, like a condensation of blue, a white dot materializes. It seems like it's really shining and you won't lose it anymore. But if you look away, it disappears and you can't find it again. The thing is that in the dark we look at receptors called rods. During the day, cones. Cones are not adapted to see stars, and you can't make the rods turn on in daylight. They say that in addition to the telescope, a deep well helps, but they still haven't decided whether it's true or not. The experiments gave rather a negative result, and it's hard to find a place on Earth where a vertical well, of course, looks directly at Venus or Jupiter, which are not at their zenith in Russian latitudes. Perhaps the rods start working in the darkness of the well, which is why the effect is happening. There are separate reports that even without a telescope, Venus, Jupiter, and the brightest comets are visible during the day, but in the mountains. Climbing up where it is already difficult to breathe makes the sky inky blue, and the stars are much more noticeable. It turns out that to see the stars during the day without any tricks, you need to remove the air. This is exactly what Daniel Sviatsky writes about in the final part of the article. Are such phenomena caused by the formation of any breakthroughs in our atmosphere when its upper layers are made? for some reason, for a while completely free from vapor particles reflecting sunlight and causing the blue sky under normal conditions? Now, it's worth taking a look at the historical reports themselves, which are cited by Daniil Sviatsky. At least there will be a few less secrets. The testimony of the monks from the Russian Chronicle is most transparent. They were observing Venus, of course, and they saw it because it was next to the moon. Stated above, it was how difficult it is to find Venus in the full glare of the sun. With one exception, if it doesn't cling to the moon. Taking a closer look at the crescent moon, the eye begins to notice the white dot of the planet. The monks must have been big-eyed, but what made them follow the crescent moon? That calendar. Remember, we mentioned that there was a calendar reform in the country. If you don't have a radio, the moon is almost the only reference point. Namely, it is necessary to notice the crescent as young as possible immediately after the new moon. Apparently, the monks practice this. They are watching, and here it is. Unfortunately, the three phenomena in those years, 190s of Common Era, are more confusing, and it's been a long time. At the beginning of the video presented was a striking description of Commodus, an animal's skin, in this circus arena, while the Russian journalist Arsukhin from that newspaper, Komsomolskaya Pravda, relied on the work of Cassius Dio, who writes vividly as if he had been there himself. But he doesn't say a word about the stars during the day. He even has a story about the statues of gods that walked away by themselves, but not about the stars. Something vague flashes in another anonymous work. We're referring to Scriptores Historia Augusta, a collection from the 4th century, but without the chilling details. But what about the drawing? Here it is, everything is drawn, or Arsukhin wishes you had not asked. Sviatsky took the drawing from the book Chronicle of Signs and Wonders by Konrad Likostenis. Likostenis is a priest from Basel, and in 1557 he published a colossal volume of 700 masterfully made engravings with all sorts of anomalies and more than 1,000 descriptions. I have a video about it. It's a very interesting subject. It's interesting to read that even now, but according to Arsukhin, but to put it bluntly, it's a dubious source for him. For some reason, Sviatsky decided that the artist of the 16th century had not invented the drawing out of his head, but copied it from some ancient original. Could be, but not everybody agrees. For example, to Arsukhin, it's hardly there are no such examples. If the texts, at least with typos and edits, went through the centuries, then the illustrations were redrawn each time, adapting to the taste of the era. So the engraving is not an amphitheater at all, but the roofs of a typical European city. And the townspeople pointing fingers at the sky do not look like Romans. Why should we believe what the artist has depicted in the sky? But you cannot get rid of the phenomenon of the year 190s that easily. That was something. It may not be so picturesque, but it was, and several times. If Herodian reports that the stars were continuously visible during the day, which in addition stretched out, then Cassius clarifies, there 3 are bright near the sun. Okay, Russian monks looked at Venus near the moon. You won't see anything near the sun. Perhaps the key lies in another historical report that Sviatsky did not notice. The sky was ablaze, the chronicle writes sparingly, around the same time in 190s. A powerful magnetic storm? The aurora borealis visible even in Rome? If so, then other atmospheric phenomena are possible, which are so rich in the years of maximum solar activity. Something like a ball of lightning thrown into the daytime sky. This would explain why the stars were stretching, because they were not stars at all. But we have not seen any daytime fireballs on a clear day since. And here's another option, a supernova. For example, the famous Betelgeuse, pronounced in English, or Betelgeuse in Russian, when it explodes, will become a supernova. And it will be perfectly visible during the day. So maybe that's when it exploded. It shone. For a while, people saw it here and there. Under the pen of historians, one turned into several. This, of course, is quite possible, and even very likely, but supernova leave behind noticeable remnants, nebula. There's nothing comparable in the sky, and this hypothesis fits the descriptions with a stretch. Arsuchin added that it's good that for those who believe in UFOs, the bright stars near the sun are, of course, reflections from the sides of spaceships. He is not arguing, maybe there are reflections. There is no natural explanation anyway. Well, Sviatsky was destined to live for a long time. He died in 1940. But his life was troubled. Somehow his relations with the Bolsheviks, the communists, did not work out. In 1930, he was arrested in the case of the Russian Society of Aficionados of World Studies. He had to spend a year in prison awaiting trial. After a year in prison, Sviatsky was sent to build slave labor, basically, the White Sea-Baltic Canal as a laborer. Years of repression and work went by. On January 29, 1940, 2 weeks before the end of the internal exile, where he was banished to, he died suddenly. He was not yet 60 years old. His widow reported this sad event to the Geographical Society of the USSR. His major work, Essays on the History of Astronomy in Ancient Russia, was published only 20 years after the author's death. The outbreak of World War II and then the death of his protege Vernadsky delayed publication for a long time. It was only in 1961, 1966, thanks to the energy of Russian astronomer Kulikovsky, that his work was published in 3 issues of historical and astronomical research. He never returned to his work on the daytime stars. The topic was completely forgotten, and Sviatsky forever inscribed himself in the history of science with another work published before the revolution, Astronomical Events in Russian Chronicles over the years. You see, the phenomenon of daytime stars has not become any clearer, and it never happened again, except those cases that I presented. Let's wait, maybe we will witness it ourselves. And then the burning mystery that has left vague traces in the writings of historians will finally be revealed. What does Betelgeuse or Betelgeuse have to do with it? Well, the famous star from the constellation Orion is about to explode. Unfortunately, it is inconveniently located and it has not been visible for almost half a year due to the bright sun. Astronomers have managed to establish year-round observations. A special telescope examines the star even during the day. It fluctuates mercilessly because the air is restless during the day, but the computer vision system turns a lump of light into a flat dot. Now, let's not miss the events, but it may take a long time to wait. According to some models, it could be almost a millennium. That is what I wanted to let you know. If you check my videos from my channel, from the playlists titled Concealed History, Space Exploration, Solar System, you'll find more of my investigations about the mysteries of our universe. If you can help my research, you can do so through the links you find in the description to this video. Please subscribe to my channel. Please like my videos. Please make sure YouTube notifies you. And thank you for all your attention to my work.